Drive through Lancaster County in August. You'll see the black hats at the roadside stands. Behind them, you'll see a tall green plant your neighbor would tear out of his yard on sight. Your neighbor would call it a weed. Your county extension office might call it a nuisance. But the Amish, they call it one of the most valuable crops a family can grow. That plant has been feeding, healing, clothing, and warming Amish families for over 300 years. The United States Department of Agriculture made it functionally illegal in 1971 after the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 swept through Washington and pulled the rug out from under every small farmer in America. For nearly 50 years, growing it on your own land could send you to federal prison. The Amish never stopped. They just got quieter about it. That plant is industrial hemp. The same plant George Washington grew at Mount Vernon. The same plant the USDA begged farmers to plant during World War II and then erased from history 30 years later. Before this video is over, you're going to know how to grow it on a quarter acre, how to feed it to your hens for 30% more eggs through winter, and how to insulate the north wall of your house with it for under $300. The first time I walked onto a farm outside Millersburg, Ohio, an old man named Eli handed me a piece of rope his grandfather made and told me, "The government tried to make this a sin. This is for you if your house was built in 1965, 1975, or 1985 and you've got a quarter acre or less. No permits. No contractors. Nobody has to know." Industrial hemp. Cannabis sativa with less than 0.3% THC below the threshold to affect a child, let alone a grown man. The same level your great-grandfather grew. And yet, for almost half a century, the federal government treated it the same as heroin. Schedule 1. The most dangerous classification on the books. A plant that George Washington personally grew at Mount Vernon. A plant that Thomas Jefferson called one of the most necessary crops in the country. A plant that, in 1619, King James I ordered the colonists at Jamestown to grow 100 plants of per landowner because England could not function without it. Now, I want you to picture something. In 1942, with the country at war and the Japanese cutting off the supply of Manila hemp from the Philippines, the very same USDA that would later criminalize this plant produced a 14-minute film. It was called Hemp for Victory. They sent it to every county agriculture office in America. They begged farmers to grow 400,000 acres of it by 1945. They handed out tax stamps, free seed, and patriotic posters. American farmers stepped up, planted the fields, and saved the war effort. Then, less than 30 years later, in 1970, Richard Nixon signed the Controlled Substances Act, and by 1971, the USDA had quietly destroyed almost every copy of Hemp for Victory in its archives. They denied the film had ever existed. They denied it on the record. It was only in 1989 when two researchers found surviving prints at the Library of Congress and the National Archives that the USDA was finally forced to admit they had produced it. They had erased their own history because the truth was inconvenient. The Amish never threw their knowledge away. In Lancaster County, in Holmes County, in the smaller settlements out in Indiana and Wisconsin, the knowledge passed straight down. How to plant it in late May after the soil hits 60 degrees, how to space the seeds 4 inches apart for fiber, 18 inches apart for seed, how to harvest it before the first frost, how to ret it in the field by laying the stalks down and letting the dew and the microbes separate the bast fiber from the woody core, how to break it, scutch it, hackle it, and spin it into rope that does not rot in salt water. The last commercial hemp crop in the United States was grown in Wisconsin in 1957. After that, the silence settled in, and the only people who kept growing small patches were the Amish, the Mennonites, and a few stubborn old farmers who had learned the work from their fathers. Everyone else forgot. That forgetting was not an accident. Here is what most people do not know about why this happened. In 1937, a man named Harry Anslinger pushed through the Marijuana Tax Act. Anslinger ran the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and with Prohibition just ended, his bureau needed a new enemy to justify its budget. But he had help. That same year, popular mechanics called hemp the new billion-dollar crop because a new machine could process hemp fiber as cheaply as wood pulp. That threatened the timber industry, the synthetic fiber industry, and the petrochemical industry. They bankrolled the scare campaign, funded the newspapers, paid for the films that showed teenagers going insane after one puff, and leaned on Anslinger to write the regulations. The Tax Act did not technically outlaw hemp, it just made the stamps impossible to get, and any farmer caught without one faced criminal charges. The 1970 Controlled Substances Act finished the job. The Amish were unaffected by all of this in one critical way. They did not grow it for sale, they grew it for the household, rope for the harness, cloth for the work pants, oil from the seed for the lamps and for cooking, seed cake for the dairy cows, which produces milk so rich the cream rises in 2 hours instead of overnight. The leaves and stalks composted back into the soil and added more nitrogen per acre than almost any other crop. They were not breaking the law in any way that mattered to a federal agent looking for traffickers because there was nothing to traffic. The plant they grew had no drug value at all. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. I'm going to walk you through 3 uses for industrial hemp that you can apply to a home built in 1965, 1975, or 1985, without permits, without contractors, and without anyone knowing. Because as of the 2018 Farm Bill, growing hemp with less than 0.3% THC is federally legal again. Your state may have additional rules, but the federal ban is over, you can plant it. The Amish never stopped, and now you don't have to either. The first use is insulation. Hempcrete is a mixture of the woody inner core of the hemp stalk, called the hurd, combined with hydrated lime and water. You mix it like a thick oatmeal, and you can pack it into the cavities of an existing wall by removing a section of drywall, packing the mixture in by hand, and letting it cure for about 4 weeks before you patch the wall back up. It does not settle, it does not attract rodents, it does not grow mold because the lime keeps it alkaline, and it has an insulation value of about R2.5 per inch, which on its own is modest, but combined with its thermal mass and humidity buffering, it outperforms fiberglass batting in real-world energy bills by anywhere from 20 to 40% depending on your climate. I met a family near Sugar Creek, Ohio, who packed the north wall of an 1890s farmhouse with hempcrete in 2019. Their winter propane bill dropped from about $1,800 to under $900 in one season. They mixed it themselves in a wheelbarrow with hurd they bought for $40 a bale from a hemp processor 2 counties over. The whole north wall cost them about $320 in materials. A contractor would have charged $6,000 to spray foam the same wall and the foam off gases for years. The second use is for the garden. Hemp seed cake, which is what's left after you press the oil out of the seeds, is one of the most balanced organic fertilizers on earth. It runs about 6% nitrogen, 2% phosphorus, and 1% potassium, which is almost the exact ratio that vegetable gardens need. The Amish broadcast it under the mulch in the fall and let the worms work it in over the winter. By spring, the soil is alive with microbial activity. You can buy hemp seed cake online for about $30 per 50-pound bag, and that bag will fertilize 1,000 square feet of garden for a full season. Compared to synthetic fertilizer, you're spending the same money but feeding the soil instead of poisoning it. The third use is the simplest and the most overlooked. Hemp oil, pressed from the seed, burns in any standard oil lamp with almost no soot. The Amish use it for indoor lighting because it does not blacken the chimney glass the way kerosene does, and it does not give off the toxic fumes that paraffin produces. 1 gallon of cold-pressed hemp seed oil costs about $60, but it lasts a household of 4 through an entire winter of power outages and evening reading. If you've been buying lamp oil at the hardware store, you've been paying for refined petroleum that gives your wife a headache. The Amish figured this out 2 centuries ago. But here is where the story gets darker, and where I have to tell you something the USDA does not want sitting in plain view. While they were busy making hemp illegal in 1971, they were also taking delivery of a chemical stockpile from the Department of Defense. The chemical was Agent Orange. It had been used in Vietnam to defoliate the jungle, and after Nixon signed the Paris Peace Accords on the 27th of January 1973, the leftover supply was sitting at Kelly Air Force Base in Texas. The DoD did not want to pay to dispose of it, so they handed it over to the USDA Forest Service, who used it through the 1970s to spray the brush and broadleaf weeds across the clear-cut forests of the western United States. The same agency that had just told American farmers they could no longer grow a plant that had clothed and fed this country for 350 years was now spraying dioxin-contaminated herbicide on public lands. The dioxin in those later batches of Agent Orange was significantly higher than the dioxin in the wartime batches because the manufacturing process had been sped up by raising the temperature in the reactors. The USDA knew, the DoD knew. A 2021 PBS Independent Lens documentary called People vs. Agent Orange laid out the paper trail in detail. The same Forest Service workers who sprayed it developed the same cancers that Vietnam veterans got. Their children developed the same birth defects. And the plant the USDA had just outlawed, the plant that the Amish were still quietly growing in their backlots, would have replaced almost every product those herbicides were being used to defend. Hemp pulp can replace wood pulp for paper, which removes the need to spray clear-cut forests. Hemp fiber can replace cotton, which is the most pesticide-intensive crop on Earth. Hemp seed oil can replace petroleum-based plastics for many household uses. Every one of those substitutions would have shrunk the chemical industry. None of them happened because the plant was illegal. The Amish kept growing it, not in big fields, just in the back garden behind the corn where nobody driving by would notice. They grew enough for the household. They saved the seed every year, hand-selected from the strongest plants, and they kept genetic lines alive that the USDA seed banks had let go extinct. When the 2018 Farm Bill finally re-legalized industrial hemp, a few researchers from Cornell and Penn State went looking for old American hemp genetics, and they found them in Amish seed collections in Lancaster County. The plants that fed the Jamestown colony in 1619 were still being grown in 2018 by families who had never stopped. That is the kind of stubbornness that saves a civilization. Most of us, if we'd been told for 50 years that something was a felony, would have given it up. The Amish did not give it up because they did not take their orders from Washington. They took their orders from their grandfathers, and their grandfathers took their orders from the soil. The soil never lied to them. The soil told them that this plant fed the cows, fertilized the garden, and clothed the children. And no piece of paper signed by a politician could change what the soil knew. Now I want to tell you what the 1,971 enforcement actually looked like on the ground for the families who had been growing it. In Lancaster County, there was a man named Amish Stoltzfus. The specific family asked not to be identified in print, but the story was documented in a 1972 issue of a small Mennonite agricultural newsletter I found in the archives at Elizabethtown College. Amos had a 4-acre plot of fiber hemp his father had planted in 1948 that he had been reseeding from saved seed every spring for 22 years. In September of 1971, 2 federal agents drove up his lane in a brown sedan, walked into his field with a clipboard, and told him he had 30 days to plow it under or face seizure of the property. He was 63 years old. He had used that hemp every single year to make rope for his harness lines, to stuff mattresses, and to press oil for his wife's wooden bowls and butter molds. He plowed it under on a Tuesday in early October. His grandson told the newsletter that Amos never planted another row of anything that fall, and he died the following March of what the family called a broken heart and what the doctor called congestive heart failure. That is what 1,971 looked like in the real world. It was not a policy debate. It was old men watching federal agents walk through fields their grandfathers cleared with oxen and being told that the plant they had been growing since before the Civil War was now contraband. The hemp Amos grew tested at less than 0.3% THC, the exact legal threshold under the 2018 Farm Bill, the law that finally, after 47 years, made it legal again. 47 years. A child born the year Amos plowed his field under was 53 years old before the law that took it from him was reversed. An entire working life passed in the gap. And here's the part that the Amish understood that the rest of us forgot. They never stopped, not entirely. A handful of seeds saved in a coffee can in a barn rafter in 1971 became a row planted in 1978, became a corner of a field in 1985, became, by the time the law changed, a living genetic line that had never been interrupted. Researchers at Cornell University in 2019 tested feral hemp populations across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And what they found was that the genetics in those Amish-adjacent counties were not the wild ditch weed they expected. They were cultivated fiber and seed varieties, intentionally selected, with consistent low THC content and high seed yields. Someone had been keeping them alive. The paper, published in the journal GRO Genes in May of 2020, used the phrase persistent agricultural genetics, which is academic language for the plain fact that a community of farmers quietly refused to let a useful plant die. Before I give you the secret finale, the technique from a 1,943 pamphlet that almost nobody alive still knows one quick thing. Everything I have been pulling out of these Amish farms and government archives, the hempcrete that cut a Sugar Creek family's propane bill in half for $320, the seed cake that feeds your garden soil instead of poisoning it, the lamp oil that burns clean through a winter power outage, the genetics the Amish kept alive through 47 years of federal hostility, the lime wash thermal coating from the wall video, the 15 uses of borax from the borax video, the 20 Depression-era money secrets from the self-reliance video, the sand oven from the retained heat cooking video, and all the other pieces I have pulled out of Lancaster County and Holmes County over the years. I have put it all in one place, crop by crop, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish Home System. Link is in the description. But stay right here, because the chicken technique I am about to show you costs less than $3, takes 3 days, and will have your hens laying through January and February while your neighbors are buying eggs at the store. Now I want to give you the secret finale. This is the thing I promised you at the start. The one specific technique I have not seen written down in any modern gardening book. And I only found it because I sat at a kitchen table in Holmes County with a woman named Mary Yoder, who was 83 years old and who learned it from her mother. Her mother learned it from a hand-typed pamphlet that had been passed around the church district in the early 1940s during the Hemp for Victory campaign. Mary still had the pamphlet. The pages were brown, the ink was faded, but the instructions were clear. Here is the technique. You take a small handful of hemp seeds, about a tablespoon, and you soak them in clean water for 12 hours. You drain them, and you place them in a shallow tray with a wet cotton cloth over the top. You keep the cloth wet for 3 days until the seeds sprout little white tails about a 1/4 inch long. Now those sprouted seeds are not for planting, they are for feeding to your laying hens. Mary's mother discovered, and the 1,943 pamphlet confirmed, that sprouted hemp seed fed to chickens during the winter months increases egg production by somewhere between 30 and 40% compared to standard feed. The reason is that the sprouting process activates enzymes in the seed that make the protein, the omega-3 fatty acids, and the trace minerals more bioavailable to the bird. The hens get a complete nutritional profile they cannot get from cracked corn or layer pellets. Their eggs come out with deep orange yolks, the shells are noticeably thicker, and the birds keep laying through January and February when most backyard flocks shut down. Mary said her family kept 12 hens, and they were eating fresh eggs all winter long while the neighbors were buying them at the store. The USDA never published this. The 1,943 pamphlet was not a USDA document. It was produced by a Pennsylvania extension agent who worked closely with Amish and Mennonite farmers during the war, and after the war ended, his pamphlets disappeared from the official record. The technique survived because women like Mary's mother kept the paper and passed the knowledge along. You can do this yourself this weekend with a tablespoon of seeds and a kitchen towel. If you have backyard chickens, you will see the difference within 10 days. If you do not have chickens, the same sprouted seeds work in small quantities in oatmeal, in salads, or sprinkled on toast, and the omega-3 profile rivals fish oil at a fraction of the cost. 1 tablespoon of hemp seed costs about 15 cents. 1 tablespoon sprouted produces about 2 tablespoons of feed. A backyard flock of 6 hens fed this way through a single winter will produce conservatively, an extra 140 eggs you would not otherwise have. At store prices, that is about $40 worth of eggs for less than $3 of seed. The math is not complicated. The Amish have been doing this math for 200 years. What you've just heard is something that was nearly erased from American memory. A plant that built this country, that fed the soldiers at Valley Forge with seed cake, that clothed the pioneers, that the Amish protected through 50 years of federal hostility, is finally legal again. And almost nobody knows what to do with it, because the people who knew were forbidden to teach for half a century. You are not a criminal for wanting this knowledge back. You are a citizen recovering what was always yours. Eli told me the government tried to make this a sin. They didn't. The soil never agreed. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. You plant a small patch in the corner of your yard next May. You buy a bale of hurd for your north wall. You soak a tablespoon of seed and you watch your hens lay through the winter. You become a little less dependent on the people who told you for 50 years that the plant your great-grandfather grew was a crime. Now, I want to ask you something specific. Of the 3 uses I told you about, the hempcrete insulation, the seed cake fertilizer, or the sprouted seed for the chickens, which one are you going to try first? Drop it in the comments below. Just type the word insulation, fertilizer, or chickens and tell me where you live. I read every single comment, and the ones from folks over 55 always teach me something I did not know. This channel is for people who are tired of being told what they cannot do on their own land, in their own kitchen, with their own hands. We are recovering a way of life that worked for 300 years before someone decided it was inconvenient. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because the next video is about a specific kind of root cellar that maintains 52 degrees Fahrenheit year-round without any electricity, and the design came from a 1934 farm bulletin that was pulled from circulation in 1962. I'll see you there.